Do I ever struggle with consistency? Yes, but you wouldn't know because I still show up. I made a commitment to show up regardless of what would happen. And the quarantine chronicles that I endured was my proof to myself that I could still show up in spite of. Hey, entreleaders, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to the 31st episode of the Leaders Lab podcast. And today I have a very special episode for you. I was talking to my godmother on the phone, I think maybe yesterday, and we were talking about how I'm at like episode 31 now with the podcast and how I've been consistent in spite of everything that has happened to me this year. And it kind of just made me reflect on how I got started with the Leaders Lab podcast, what it means, what it represents, and also, what's next? Like, what do I see happening with the Leaders Lab podcast after as we move forward? And so that's what today's episode is all about. If you are watching the video version of the podcast, I do want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Please don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell so you can actually know when new episodes, whether it's on Monday or Wednesday, are uploaded, new videos are uploaded to my channel. And also, don't forget to comment. I love interaction. And if you comment, I promise I will respond. So don't forget to do that and share this episode. So the Leaders Lab podcast, how did I get started? First of all, you have to think about, well, where'd you get the name from? And for me, I like coming up with really cool names. I'm just going to be honest. I love coming up with really cool names or acronyms, things like that. And I knew that I wanted to do a podcast. Actually, I've had podcasts before, but they were private podcasts. So I had podcasts for like private groups. I had one for my university students back when I was teaching a communication course with Southern New Hampshire University. Also, I had a private podcast for my health and wellness. It was called Project 35 because as I was getting closer to the age of 35, I was really working on my health goals overall. And so podcasting wasn't something that was new to me, but doing it publicly instead of it just being for private groups and private audiences, that was something that was new for me. With the other podcasts, I used software. It was really kind of like an online application that was called Spreaker, Spreaker, Spreaker.com. Worked well for me, but I wanted something different. And last year in 2020, I knew that I wanted to have a podcast for my professional brand, my leadership brand. I went to look back at Spreaker, but I didn't like the monthly fees. In order to have a really good podcast with all of the features, you would have to pay like a monthly subscription or premium. And at the time, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I was already spending money investing in other resources to build my brands, and just having that monthly expense, it didn't seem like a necessity. So I paused on my podcast adventure. I knew that it was going to come up at some point, but I just paused and I was like, well, you know what? If God wants me to do it, he will make a way, right? Like if he wants me to do it, he'll show me, what to use, what resources, and yada, yada. So several months passed by and I started working with a private group of entreleaders, young women who are, most of them were millennials. They have their own careers, but they also had some individual projects that they wanted to work on. So I started working with them. And one in particular had a podcast. She started a podcast and everything, and she didn't have graphics. Like she didn't care about any of that. She didn't have equipment. She just got on her phone and started recording. And I'm like, what app is this that allows you to do that? And she was like, oh, it's Anchor. And so I started asking, well, how much does it cost? She was like, oh, no, it's free. That was the key word right there. I'm sorry, how much is it? She said, oh, no, it's free. I don't pay anything. And long story short, she was even being monetized by this application, this online software that she wasn't even paying for. Not only that, it wasn't like she was only on Anchor, anchor.fm, by the way. It wasn't that she was only on Anchor, but her podcast was also syndicated. It was out on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and so many others. And so I was like, I need to look into this. So she shared the website with me, anchor.fm, and I took a look at it and I played around with it for a little bit. And then I just said, okay, well, I'll think about it. And I was trying to come up with a name. I wanted to, come up with just everything, because when I do something, okay, this is a little secret about me. When I do something, I usually go full throttle, okay? Like I think of in terms of branding, I think in terms of production and design. And I've always wanted things to be perfect. But perfection was the thing that was paralyzing me, because I started giving myself all of these excuses, what I did not have, what I could not do on my own. I didn't have a team. How was I going to make it look like this, sound like that, and everything? And finally, I decided to take my own advice that I was giving to others. Focus on the progress, not perfection. There's a difference in producing something with excellence and producing something in perfection. When you do something in excellence, you give it everything you have, using everything you have. You work with what you have until you win with what you have. When you are operating in perfection, there's no room for improvement, because you have to make sure that everything is in place. If you don't have it in place, you will wait until you go buy it or invest in it or borrow it or whatever. And that was my mindset. So I decided to take my own advice and to produce with what I already had at my exposure. I decided to use what I already had and create it. And I started off with, I thought, I was only going to talk about communication. So I called it the Communication Collective. I called it the Communication Collective, because we are going to work on your communication. We're going to help you be a better communicator in your organization, be a better communicator with relationships, be a better communicator with yourself, right? The Communication Collective. And I started looking at my professional brand as it started developing, because at this time I was also working on only focusing DrCharityTV on my organization development and leadership specialty, not having it as this, complete variety show of my travel, my health and wellness, and my professional life. And so as I started looking deeper into what DrCharityTV was going to represent, I focused more on leadership, because as a leader, communication is a non-negotiable. Good communication, effective communication, it is absolutely necessary. And also entrepreneurship, because many leaders are entrepreneurs. Many entrepreneurs do kind of operate in leadership. And it wasn't until several months later when I actually came across the term entreleadership. So that's why now you see entreleadership being, I say, hey, entreleaders, and entreleadership, those are the things that I talk about. I just take the leadership in entrepreneur and put it together, because it was to focus on, originally, the Leaders Lab was to focus on leadership, multi-passionate entrepreneurialism, having multiple passions as an entrepreneur, and communication. So I started with the concepts of what this type of podcast or these messages would come across as. And it was all about development. It was about professional development. It was about personal development. And it was about relational development. And as, I started thinking in terms of, it's all about working on improving, becoming the better version of yourself in all aspects of your life. And for me, when I think about working on myself, I think about being in a lab. You know, when you're going into a lab, you're working on something, you know, it's like a science. There's a science to it. There's a method to what you are working on. It's a method to the production. It's a method to development. And what I foresaw with the Leaders Lab is just being in a lab, you know, having on this lab coat, and also just developing leaders, millennial leaders all across the globe, developing people who wanted to be more than what they saw that they were, helping people to grow into the type of person that they only could dream of becoming. So that's where I got the name, the Leaders Lab. Okay, the Leaders Lab podcast. And it just came to me. And the thing is, see, when you start a podcast and you have a name, you need to check to make sure that name is available and that no one else has it. And I knew that it was designed for me to have because no one else had it. There were some that were quite close. It was like, I think there's one that's called like the Leadership Lab or something like that. I don't know. But I didn't want the Leadership Lab. What came to me was the Leaders Lab, because I'm not so much focused on just the quality. I'm focused on the person, right? I don't want to just focus on the quality of leadership. I want to focus on the individual, the person that's becoming the leader. So that's how I came up with the name. And then someone, you know, may think that I actually have a team of graphic artists who comes up with my flyers or comes up with the, you know, just all of the stuff. It's me. I do not have a graphic design background. However, I was a creative media director for 9.5 years, and I worked with some of the most amazing and talented young graphic designers. They taught me so much indirectly, because I oversaw our creative media department, which involved social media marketing. It involved web design. It involved our marketing and promotion. It involved even creating apps at one time. I mean, it involved so much, the television production. And working with these graphics, you know, these graphic artists, these designers showed me so much. We would have sessions to where, you know, so they would have a project or a task that they would need to complete, and then they would need to submit it to me for feedback or for approval. We would go back and forth, talking about how to make the design look a certain way. And I had no idea that something that I did almost 10 years ago would have such a huge impact on me now, as I'm designing, you know, as I'm designing graphics for my own podcast and for my videos. And now I do have a background in video editing, post-production. So I do have experience with that. But incorporating graphics into my videos, honestly, I had every excuse in the world to say, well, I don't have enough money to buy a graphic, you know, to pay for a graphic designer to be on my team just yet, or I don't have the skills to design. And I just said, you know what? We're just going to do it. We're just going to play around with what we have and create what we can, work with what we have until we win with what we have. And so I started designing my own things and, you know, trying to find the right balance between my episodes of how I, you know, I stick with my brand colors. And so that's why on, I think, even weeks, you might see like the bluer color instead of the rose gold or pinkish or mauve, and they alternate back and forth. But that was just how I came up with it. And I can honestly say that it was all God and his gift on my life, because I have no background in graphic design. My father does, though. My father actually has background in arts, and I do know that I get my love for art, you know, my talent for art naturally. I believe that it is passed down from my father to me. So that's how I started getting all of my graphics. Now, in terms of how I came up with my intro music and outro music, again, like I said before, I am a musician, and I also have production experience with pre, post, and like live production experience. And so I knew that I didn't want my voice to be the voice of the introduction. I didn't want that because as I was working with one of my executive producers in the past, okay, I had a talk show that was on this YouTube channel. It's called The Lady Judah Show. I had a talk show and I did my own introductions and everything. And I remember him giving me some constructive criticism, saying that it would sound better for me to have a different voice introducing my show, because my voice would be the show that I would have throughout the entire thing. And it made sense. You know, he also had a background in production. So of course I was going to listen to him. He's wiser. You know, he had more experience. So this time around for the Leaders Lab podcast, I didn't want a woman because I knew that I would be reaching more than just women. But shout out to all my womenpreneurs. Shout out to all my women leaders. I appreciate you all so much. I knew I needed to have a male presence. I needed to have a male voice. And so I went to find a professional to record my introduction. And also there are some things that you all haven't heard yet that I had him record as well, like breaks and sponsors and all of that. They will come later on. They will come later on, but I had him to record all of that. Of course, I paid for it, but it was worth it. When something is really worth the investment, that's how you know that you're serious about your passion. You're not going to give any excuses or anything. You're just going to be like, listen, I'm just going to do it. Regardless, I'm just going to show up and I'm going to do it. So that's how I got my graphics and my jingle and my songs and everything together. What about my content? How do I decide what I'm going to talk about? Well, I do a couple of things. One of the things that I started out doing actually was I was talking about topics that I thought entrepreneurs would like to hear. And then what I started doing, if you remember, I came back to China and I had that entire quarantine experience. And I started going through, because of what I went through in the quarantine, which was a total of 59 days, by the way. It was only supposed to be 14 days, and my quarantine experience was actually 59 days. What I was dealing with at the time, I needed to talk about. And I did it in terms of being motivational. I talked about self-talk, dealing with negative self-talk, because that's what I was dealing with myself. I wasn't talking from the position of an expert. I was talking from the position of someone who was actively going through those very things, the very scenarios and situations that I was encouraging someone else. Basically, I was encouraging myself. And so that went on for maybe about six episodes or so. Once I got settled into my home, and actually, let me just say, my podcast all started out audio. It was only audio. It wasn't until about a few months ago, maybe about April or May, once I got my home studio set up. It wasn't until then that I actually started the video version of the podcast. I wanted to have something visual, which conversely, it actually added more work for me to do, because when you're doing an audio podcast, actually, I don't have to get dressed up. I could be anywhere and just pull out my microphone and my garage band and just record. But I started doing more. And I feel like it's been worth it. I do feel like it's been worth it. I started searching online for different topics to talk about. We call it search engine optimization, SEO. And I started thinking about topics that would be beneficial for entre-leaders to know about, millennial entre-leaders, in terms of organization, organizational communication, organization development, cross-cultural communication, working in teams, managing yourself, managing people. And so I started thinking about those topics overall. And I did a little search just to see if people were actually looking for those topics. And if they were looking for those topics, which ones were the most popular. And so I started doing that a few months ago. And I think that the topics are doing well. I think the episodes are doing well. I don't know. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. But I just decided that I was going to be consistent, which is the next thing that I kind of want to talk about, which is the battle with consistency. Do I ever struggle with consistency? Yes, but you wouldn't know because I still show up. There are so many times so many times where it's a day where I'm supposed to have the podcast already uploaded, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, this would be a great day to relax or rest, or oh my gosh, I'm so behind because I've been working on this and working on that, which is kind of like today. Today I've been working on so many things, not all at the same time. I've been unitasking, not multitasking. I've been unitasking, focusing on one thing in separate intervals. And so, yes, I do struggle with consistency, but honestly, it's about showing up. I made a commitment to show up regardless of what would happen. And the quarantine chronicles that I endured was my proof to myself that I could still show up in spite of, that I could still produce in spite of what I was dealing with, and that I did not have an excuse strong enough to keep me from bringing you guys the episodes. And so I even continued to podcast while I was traveling. The past couple of weeks, I was away on business and I was in hotels, and I still made sure that I brought forth my podcast episodes to you, and just being consistent for me. And I actually, man, I think it was maybe in like episode, I wasn't even in the double digits of episodes yet when I was watching Kev on stage on Instagram. And, he has his own, app now, studio, everything. And he was talking about his podcast. And he said that as he was researching before he started his podcast, he found that people say, don't judge the success of your podcast prior to having produced 100 episodes. And that stuck with me. It's like, don't give up on your podcast before 100 episodes. Like, you need to be consistent, produce, show up, and do everything you need to do for at least 100 episodes before you take a step back and decide whether or not your podcast is being effective. And like I said, I wasn't even in the double digits yet. And I heard that and I was like, golly, dang, this means I really have to be in this thing for the long haul. And so it hasn't been easy, but it also hasn't been a huge challenge. It's all about deciding to show up no matter what. And so here I am, 31 episodes in, and I still see promise. Now, to be honest, I don't know who is listening or watching the episodes. I could go back and look at my analytics, my data, my statistics. I have seen that I have gone and looked a little bit on Anchor. It's not as many, but Anchor now has been bought by Spotify. So I could go and check I should go and check my analytics. Anchor does kind of give me all of those statistics of like who's listening and when. And then also I get YouTube analytics from who watches the videos and who likes and who comments. So at the moment, it's nowhere near where I hope it will go. But sheesh, at least there's some type of activity. There's something that's there. It's better than having absolutely nothing, which is what I would have had I never started. Or if I was very inconsistent with it, you listening to me right now, you wouldn't be listening to me. You wouldn't be watching me right now. So what's next for the Leaders Lab podcast? So I want to focus on, I'm going to continue my focus on communication matters, how we communicate with ourselves, because the more I do my research on this topic, the more I realize that it's not just me that's dealing with self-talk, whether positive or negative. This is one of the reasons why I firmly believe in affirmations. This is one of the reasons why I created affirmations to share with others. So communication matters. Basically, personal communication, organizational communication, how you communicate with your teams as an entreleader, also as a team member, how you can communicate with your colleagues and also your leader. I think that those have been very beneficial to many of you. And so I'm going to continue to talk about that. Also, I am going to be focusing on professional development, specifically in the fields of entreleadership, sharing some of the resources that I use as an entreleader, and also some of the strategies that I use to plan my projects and tasks, also to organize them and then manage them as I carry them out, as I execute. So I'm definitely going to be focusing more on the professional development as well. And then I actually look forward to some collaborations, finding fellow academic professionals who are millennial entreleaders, or maybe, they have their own career and they're working really hard in there. New doctors, new PhD, new doctor of management, new doctor of science, new doctors of education, collaborating with many of them, also being featured on other podcast shows. I would love to do that. And so in order for me to really do that, I kind of have to put myself out there a little bit more. I haven't done that. I've been a bit hidden, but I've been working on getting out in the public more, and it's happening. It is happening. And lastly, I have a question that I actually want to ask you all, because I've been doing a little bit of research on this. When should a new season begin? I go and I look on Apple Podcasts, and there are some shows that they have so many seasons, but of course, they started several years ago. Then you have some who they started maybe like 1 or 2 years ago, and they may have like 4 or 5 seasons. Then you have some shows where they've been on for quite some time, but they only have like 3 seasons. And I mean, like, all of their seasons are up in the 3 digits, like 125 and all of that. And I'm just like, I'm on episode 31. When do I begin a new season? Obviously, it's not ready for season 2 yet. I'm still on season 1, but I'm thinking, because I'm a forward thinker. So I'm thinking, when should I start a new season? Is there like a certain number of episodes that I need to have before I end the first season and go into another season? Should I follow seasonal shows on TV like how they do? They do it based on quarters, or how do I map out a seasonal show? Basically, like, how do I do seasons? And then the other question is it even necessary? When I upload my episodes to Anchor, of course, I have to put, season 1. I have to put what season it is. And so I've just been wondering, is it necessary? Is it necessary to have a season 2 or any of those things? So I don't know. That's something that I'm considering. So my question of the day actually is it necessary to have seasons on a show? And if so, when should a new season begin? I want to hear from you in the comment section below. If you're listening to this on Anchor or Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or any of those things, let me know. Call in on Anchor, or head over to youtube.com/DrCharityTV and let me know what your thoughts are. Also, if you're listening to this episode, please, please, please accept my heartfelt gratitude for rocking with me so far in 2021. Having you with me, whoever you are, it encourages me to know that somebody somewhere is benefiting from my obedience to move forward and not allow excuses to keep me from doing the thing that I know that I'm supposed to do. And as a thank you, I'd love to give you a copy of 31 powerful affirmations to transform your mind, to empower your development as an entreleader. I want to see you succeed in all areas of your life, and it first begins with your mind. So you can visit the link in the show notes or description box below to download your free copy of these affirmations, or you can actually simply type in your web browser, linktr.ee/DrCharityTV. Listen, thank you so much for tuning into the 31st episode of the Leaders Lab podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe. Also, download today's episode, rate, comment, and share so we can reach millennial entreleaders all across the globe. And you can connect with me on social media at DrCharityTV. No matter what it is, whether it's Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Periscope, Pinterest, or even of course, on YouTube, it's all DrCharityTV. And then on the Facebook page, it is actually DrCharityTV page. Thank you once again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys next week in the lab.
Thank you for listening to the Leaders Lab podcast. Visit our website at www.drcharitytv.com.